And so, you know, we've just heard from a bunch of experts about training and Avalanche resources and that sort of thing. So I just wanted to open up the conversation for more of a discussion around training and how different programs are doing training, what best practices that we can share across programs. And it's going to be a little bit different for programs that are using staff versus volunteers, that sort of thing. But I'm interested to know kind of what certifications different groups are requiring for their snow rangers as far as Avi Certs or wilderness medicine. Does your program pay for that, or is it expected that your folks show up with those trainings? What sort of trainings do you do in-house or don't have the opportunity to do but would want to? And can we share resources of the opportunities for joint training? I think, you know, with this idea of a Snow Ranger Summit, if we could do it in person, that would be another, you know, potential time or place to do some of these joint trainings in the future. So hopefully we can work through some of those questions in the next 15 minutes or so. Let's go ahead, since we do have this opportunity, to just do a really quick round of introduction. So just your name, who you're affiliated with, and where you're located. So again, I'm Julie Mock. I'm the Conservation Director for the Colorado Mountain Club in Salida, Colorado. And I'll go through starting at the top of my screen. Lacey.
Yeah, hi everyone. I work out of Minturn, Colorado in the White River National Forest. I am a rec specialist for the OHV Developed and Dispersed Rec Program.
Awesome, thanks for being here. Laura?
Hi everybody. I work at the Gunnison Ranger District, and in the summer I'm an OHV trail crew leader, and then in the winter Snow Ranger.
Awesome. How about our Uray Snow Rangers? Oh, we lost their video. Oh, there's their video, but no sound. There they are.
All right, here we go. I'm Caleb Valdez. I'm here in the special uses and working with Julie to help supervise the Snow Rangers.
I'm Brian. I'll be a Snow Ranger for the Uray District this winter, and excited for the season.
Hi, I'm Cricket Olin, Snow Ranger this year as well.
Great. And let's see, how about Monty?
Yeah, good afternoon, Monty Luderman. I'm Aspen Sopris Ranger District Snow Ranger, but I'm currently in an acting role with the Sulphur Ranger District of Arapahoe National Forest.
Great. And Joe Carlson?
Wow, this is a sweet group. I just want to notate that. Yeah, I manage the permit at Crested Butte Mountain Resort and also our wilderness areas on the district.
Awesome. Max.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Max Regency on the Eagle Holy Cross Ranger District, Mountain Sports Administrator there. And I will just say apologize in advance. I have a call in 8 minutes that I'm gonna have to jump onto. So I will be only here momentarily.
No.
Nice to see everyone.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, Max. Kim?
Hi, everyone. Kim Anaclerio, Program Director for Mammoth Lakes Recreation out in Mammoth Lakes, California.
Great. And Joe Laughlin?
I apologize for the lack of camera. It's telling me to choose another camera, but I don't know how to do that. So you'll just have to take, I don't know, use your imagination, but I'm happy to be here.
And Robin? Robin, you're muted. You can hear us. Okay, let's try Shelby. Oh, Shelby, I might have to join your phone over. Oh, there you are.
Hi.
Perfect.
I'm doing like phone and the computer. I can't see myself, so I don't know what you guys are seeing, but I'm the permanent administrator for the Clear Creek Ranger District on the Arapahoe Roosevelt National Forest, and I am the snow ranger for Loveland Ski Area.
Awesome, great. And Ken, that's the last one.
Trying to get the camera working, guys. There we go. How's that?
Perfect.
I'm Ken Straley. I'm the Recreation, Wilderness, and Trails Program Manager for the GMUG National Forest. I see some of my peeps here. Hi, everybody.
Awesome. Great. Oh, and we've got from Robin, she's the OHV tech in the summer and the snow ranger in the winter on the Stanislaus in California. Awesome, great. Well, thanks everybody for jumping in here. Let me share my screen again with those. And I've got all kinds of screens up here with the questions that we want to just chat through real quick right now. And yeah, so I'm curious to hear from different programs what certs you require of your snow rangers and why. If you make a distinction between Avi 1 or Pro 1, can somebody like to kind of jump in and share what their requirements are for Avi trainings?
I'll jump in really quickly. I'm going to speak to the Vail Pass Winter Recreation Area, Julie, and I do know that they at a minimum like to have an Avi 1, Recreation Avi 1. However, Kate Morris, who was on this call earlier, she just took her Pro 2 up in the Tetons. So it's depending on how many years I feel is what they're looking at is, I mean, but at a minimum it's that Rec 1.
Great, that's helpful, Max. Others?
We don't actually require anything, but I think, we're not a snow ranger at this point. I think that a minimum everyone is so smart. But what we have done is our local Avalanche Center, Eastern Sierra Avalanche Center, is going to give our trail hosts like an overview about, not like an avalanche training, but what to tell people where to find the most current and local information. So David asked a question earlier about what is the Avalanche Centers feel the most important things are to let people know. So we're going to try to be letting our hosts ask those questions to people like, do you know you're going into avalanche terrain? Do you know where to find information out about where you're headed and stuff like that?
Great. Yeah, and I know for our program, we don't have a hard and fast requirement. I think we're trying to, at minimum, get folks through a Rec 1 if they're going to be working for us. I think probably preference would be to have folks at the Rec 2 or even the Pro 1 level, just to, again, I think some of it's even just a comfort level in communicating just what you were talking about, Kim, like communicating that information to the public and being comfortable enough with the knowledge base to be able to do some of that. I will note too that we've been able to pay for some of the training, particularly some of the Abbey training that our folks have gone through, and that's been, I think, probably helpful, and certainly Cricket and others can speak to that. This year in particular, we made the rescue course a requirement. So we for sure we're going to put our folks through the ARI rescue course. And then if we were able to do kind of professional development, the ARI 2 or the Pro 1 for our folks, that was kind of our goal. Other thoughts on AVI requirements or wilderness medicine also was the other topic I wanted to ask about.
Hey, Julie, I just kind of wanted to give you a background just for the Forest Service in general with training.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of avalanche, ARI training and whatnot. There's nothing per se that I know that's like required, like you're required to have this training if you're going to go into this position. But what we do have is what's called an individual development program, where every year we build this IDP and we can insert trainings into that and have our supervisor sign off. Now, where we come into problems is potentially finding money to pay for those trainings. But last year, myself, Joe, and Laura attended a one-day rescue course, and then subsequently planned a kind of a practice day with all of our recreation staff, just to kind of keep up on our skills. In addition to that, we have JHAs where we can insert trainings or certain types of gear that might be required of us to do this type of work. So anyways, I just wanted to throw that out there just as kind of a background.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, I'll add on to that a little bit. It seems to come up with our snowmobile program mostly, and Joe mentioned it. The minimum requirements are really low. It's more like an awareness class. At least in my first days with the Forest Service, it was more of a, brief avalanche education as part of an overall snowmobile training. So ARI 1, as Max mentioned, is great. I don't know that that's spec'd out. Like we have a health and safety code handbook that kind of identifies required trainings and stuff. So it's actually a fairly low requirement. Same with, wilderness medicine. I think it's for us at the Forest Service first aid CPR as kind of a minimum qualification. So anything above that really helps you get into positions. I like what Joe was saying about, like annual refreshers are really encouraged. Aspen has a really good, kind of a 1 day in the classroom, 1 day in the field program you can sign up for. So that's something I've been doing as part of like a continuing education, but not required.
great. That's helpful. Other input on the wilderness medicine piece? I know for CMC, really with any of our, whether it's our volunteer trip leaders or our summer trail crews, WUFA is kind of the minimum for us, Wilderness First Aid. Definitely with WUFR, Wilderness First Responder preferred. And so I think we've been lucky that the last couple of years with the Snow Ranger program, I think they've come in with those certs that, I think to try to do a WUFR and an ABBY cert in 1 year, you're looking at, over $1,000 worth of training, probably more like close to $1,500 worth of training. So budget wise, that gets challenging, but I would say that would be our preferred level if we could get there.
I was just going to add, Julie, that for our experience, that's why it's great with this partnership. Because as some Forest Service folks mentioned, we don't always have the highest requirements for training. And, being able to work with you guys and you're able to pay for those trainings and help us, I think that's just a great partnership between the agency and a nonprofit or another entity. Because I just found it really helpful. I mean, I'm not, for one, having to go through purchasing to pay for these trainings. And in budget as well. So, I don't know how this future will look for the GMUG on having maybe potentially more rangers in partnership with other entities, but I find it extremely helpful and think that, we've done a great job to provide these folks with additional training that we don't always get as an agency. As they said, like first aid, CPR at the minimum. And so, Cricket's gone through her level 1 last year. They're going to continue with that education this year. So I think it's great to be able to collaborate on the training, because I feel like we have to provide this if we expect these people to be out in those circumstances. So it's just really important.
Yeah, I know one thing we talked about and then didn't necessarily pursue, but was with, partnering with the training providers to see if they would be willing to to provide, you know, a discounted rate or kind of an in-kind rate as a contribution to the program. And I think we can certainly make a case for the importance of that. But yeah, it'd be interesting to know if other programs are doing that. Couple minutes left. Just what other trainings do folks cover? You know, snowmobiling came up. Other specific topics that folks are providing now to their snow rangers. Or that they would want to provide.
Julie, this is Ken.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, did I walk on somebody?
Go ahead.
Yeah, Julie, I just sent you a document that may or may not be useful, but a number of years ago, I was asked to write a safety chapter of a wilderness ranger field guide. And I never actually finished that, but I finished several sections that were related to this conversation. If you care to use it or share it, it's been pretty well vetted. So I'll just put that out there. And if you want to share that with others in the group, you can.
Awesome. And Tommy Skaya from Salida, we're getting a little background. I'm not sure if you're trying to speak. I've muted him a couple times, but cool. Yeah, that'd be great, Ken. And Laura?
Yeah, I was just going to say that we constantly train with our snow rangers and our team. And some of the topics might be things that people don't think about, like trailer towing, driving in the winter. We work with our JHAs that Joe Carlson mentioned and constantly go over these tools in order to remain safe out there. And for example, we use our spots every single day, and we do that to train with them so that we know when we have an emergency that we're prepared to use that. We also do that with our radios, with our sat phone. And so we're constantly training daily. And just this week, Joe Laughlin and I were out and we're watching YouTubes and learning how to perfect or work on our skills to get better at snowmobiling or doing any of these activities that we're doing in order to get into the backcountry. So I just think it's important to constantly train and to document your training and to work on improving it all the time.
Yeah, that's great. That's a important reminder. There are so many things, and actually our folks were testing out their float packs last week, right? So you know, any other gear, things, safety gear that you're using, making sure you know how to use it. That's huge. Yeah. Cool. Well, we're about out of time. I'm going to hit this close all rooms. I'm not sure if it's going to kick us out right away or if we're going to have another minute left. So we'll see what happens.
Can I chime in just really quickly?
Yeah, please.
So Max, I know he just hopped off, but they just opened up a beacon park. It's really close to our office. They just got it running about a week ago, but I think us as snow ranger programs, I think we should be looking for places that offer that and start to utilize them pretty frequently. I think it's a really awesome program. I'm stoked to see people use it.
That's a great point. And they're popping up in more and more places. And even, you know, as a training tool, not only for our staff, but as a place to refer people, right, that may be new and to send those new users to the Beacon Park to go practice before they actually go in the backcountry. Great. Thank you for bringing that up. Cool. Okay, I'm going to close this room. We'll see what happens.
Why don't we go ahead and start the discussion around best practices for training? Does anybody want to get started discussing kind of what certifications you require of your snow rangers and whatever program you have, whether that's volunteers or employees, and kind of talk about how you fund those trainings or do you pay for those certs or what your budget is?
I can go. So yeah, our program, we have a couple of Forest Service employees, and then we have some winter volunteers that work 1 day a week. So basically most of our training that we provide to them is in-house. So anyone that's gonna, you know, operate a snowmobile, they have to get the Forest Service snowmobile certification. So we have people that are trainers on the forest for that. And then first aid CPR is just a basic one that we provide. And then if they're a Forest Service employee, we'd like to send them to Forest Protection Officer training if that's available, which is basically their ability to write tickets and stuff like that. And then past that, if we have the resources, which we have a pretty minimal budget, we can send them to Avalanche education classes. We did do that with one of our snow rangers last year. And then, advanced first aid type opportunities, but mostly it'd probably be more focused towards the Avalanche education with us. And our funding and budget for training is very limited. So usually it's just kind of the basics of being able to ride a snowmobile and public contacts and that type of stuff.
Hi, my name's Janelle Walker. I'm the new Region 5 Mountain Resorts Program lead, and I'm kind of the Dawn Dressler in California. This is a brand new position, so slowly starting to build up. We don't have snow rangers to the extent that Colorado does, or Wyoming, Washington. So we're just tipping our toe into it right now, and hopefully we will, build upon that. I'm expecting to get more training for the people that are in the field right now that aren't technically snow rangers, but it's just kind of extra duties as assigned. So same thing, Avalanche Courses, just a larger breadth of backcountry experience and getting people together, because it's been a really long time since we've actually been able to get folks together outside of COVID, even before that, just to build on that experience and get that education and foundation. So we've got a ways to go, but we're starting.
Awesome. Anybody else? I'm kind of curious, like, what the priority is as far as, because it seemed like Brendan, you mentioned the area and Avalanche, the advanced first aid training is more if like funds and time allows it. Is funding really the main reason that, or is it just kind of a lower priority to being able to make sure that people are able to operate a snowmobile, and like how did those trainings get prioritized as far as funding goes?
Yeah, so just, so the snowmobile one, obviously you need that to be able to operate the snowmobile. The first aid one, that's just kind of a base level thing that we have for a lot of our things. So to be able to run a chainsaw, you have to have first aid CPR. That's one thing I also forgot to mention is ideally they can go through our Forest Service chainsaw training so they can be certified to cut a tree off a groomed route or whatever, stuff like that. And then, honestly, we just have such a minimal budget. We oftentimes don't have capacity to send people to above and beyond things like avalanche training and more advanced, the more advanced first aid CPR type things. And since our program is pretty small, we have multiple trailheads that we're managing. There's a decent amount that goes into their time that's just like going to the trailhead, cleaning the toilet, talking to people at the trailhead. And so they're not we spend a decent amount of time in the backcountry patrolling boundaries and different things, but we're not spending like extensive amount of time because we just don't have as many dedicated staff as we could to then provide some of those extra level things where it's like we're helping respond to, maybe search and rescue things more often or whatever. We're just really limited to a very base program.
Sorry, I'm on mute. You mentioned you had limited funding. Do you have any idea or like ballpark what that funding is like per ranger or?
Yeah, so like I said, we have 3 permanent staff that they're year-round, and their primary job isn't just being a snow ranger, but they're also hiring for the trail crew and doing grants and all this other stuff. But they do get out like pretty consistently, and they're all FPOs. And then we usually have 1 to 2 seasonal winter rangers. Entry level starting point is maybe like $10,000 for one Forest Service snow ranger. and it can vary a little bit depending how you hire them, if they're an intern through Rocky Mountain Youth Corps or some other source, or if they're a Forest Service employee. We've hired the Forest Service employee just because that they can get forest protection officer training and write tickets and stuff like that if we need to. We just have a lot of use going on, and we have consistent like wilderness boundary incursion and some non-motorized use where it's blatant infractions versus just an education thing. And so we do ideally want the ability to be able to write tickets, although a large part of what we do is education. And then basically the payment to our Forest Service volunteers is that we have a bunkhouse, and so they get free housing in the winter by working 1 day a week. And we really focus them mostly on going to our highest use trailheads on like the Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and just like managing parking, talking to people, spreading the education of kind of everything we've been talking about. And usually that ends up being like a summer rec person wants to stay in Steamboat for the winter, so we keep them on. So they've got a pretty good knowledge base. And then we haven't really gotten like external ambassador programs going on. I've had that in previous places I've worked, but with the newer winter group I'm working with, it could be a possible thing where we have external public being ambassadors up at these places volunteering.
So maybe I could jump in on that. Brendan, if as you expand to have volunteer ambassadors, what sort of training are you going to have planned for them? Or, you know, I mean, one of the things that we're grappling with, to kind of piggyback off what Janelle said, you know, on a regional level, we're just sort of lurching forward, filling niches in an ad hoc capacity. And, you know, here in the Eastern Sierra, we really have sort of 5 different different hosting programs, and they're all approved, and you know the district ranger and the supervisor's office are aware of them, but there's not a whole lot of coordination between them, and training is generally done by the organizations, and they're not necessarily coordinated by LEOs, or you know everybody understands they're not doing law enforcement, but the range of interpretive services to education to sort of you know user management really runs the gamut, and you know I think we're really just grappling with how to standardize that, and how to have everybody kind of on the same page for the sake of the visitor experience, if nothing else.
Yeah, I think there's you know, you kind of have to figure out what kind of niche they're trying to address as far as education, you know, because they might be the more backcountry person that's educating on avalanche and etiquette out there, or maybe they're more the front country person at the trailhead and they're doing visitor use. My previous example was in the summertime with trail ambassadors. And so we were just having uses of like conflicts between dog walkers, mountain bikes, whatever, as well as people violating wildlife closures. And so we had like certain ambassadors that they went to and they'd hang out at the wildlife closures and they just educate people on why those wildlife closures were in place. And so it was like pretty specific to that. But we provided them with a couple-day training basically that we developed with our rec program, as well as we had our law enforcement officer come in and do a little presentation, because you know we really want to stress to these people that they are just educational people. They have no enforcement ability. We don't want them to get into situations where they're getting, you know, into a negative interaction with the public and stuff like that, or how to get out of those situations. So, you know, it's like verbal judo is one thing they talk about, just how do you talk to someone and de-escalate a situation. And for them, they're going to be pulling out of a situation if there's something goes negative quicker than say a Forest Service employee would. But yeah, just I think providing at least a day or two training of like, one, so they know like what they're trying to do, like am I trying to help with like parking and this like management area and getting that education out, or what's the issue? And then 2, like how do you talk to people, and then maybe what is some of the other basic training you want them to have, if it's first aid, CPR, or whatever it is.
I'd like to open the floor up, but if anybody else would like to share any training insights from their programs as well. I think it'd be interesting to know about opportunities for joint trainings and cross collaboration, and also if there's any other topics that you'd like to offer that you don't currently offer with your trainings?
I guess one other thing I wanted to mention too is that with the cross coordination, well, obviously this group, you know, there's that between snow rangers, so I think is really great just to see how other programs are operating. But we also, we've done joint snowmobile trainings with the Colorado State Parks, because they have their rangers will go out in the wintertime and do stuff. And so they actually have some really expert level snowmobile people, and they do, I think they have their own version of an avalanche type course. And so we've done Forest Service Colorado State Parks cross trainings, which just works out well because then they can talk to our people, and it's that way they're getting, or they can interact with the Forest Service snow rangers more.
Awesome. Are there any other training topics that you'd like to cover that you don't currently do, or?
Excuse me, Emily, I'm kind of curious. So I'm a resource assistant with the Forest Service, just an intern, if you will. So I'm in the same position as some of you folks may be doing some monitoring field observations to determine and help the agency kind of determine if a snow ranger program is viable and what resources are available. I'm kind of curious from more of a potential partner or nonprofit, like what are you looking at for training assistance with the Colorado Mountain Club, or if there's any other agency here? What assistance do you need to get a program off and running?
So for the Snow Ranger program, or for just general?
But probably collaboration and working with Snow Ranger program potentially. So volunteers, funding, logistics.
That's going to be a better question for Julie, just because I don't work directly with the Snow Ranger program typically. So she's going to be able to better answer that question for you.
Yeah.
But thank you for offering it. I look forward to hearing about that conversation.
I know one thing as far as the Snow Ranger programs, it's been very much each like forest and district are doing their own different things and different trainings and everything like that. But the example in the wilderness in the summertime, we actually have a region-wide like wilderness academy. It's like a 3 or 4 day event. And it's kind of like the one-stop shop. So if you're a brand new wilderness ranger, you can go to that academy, you can get your crosscut certification, you get, I can't remember if they do first aid CPR, but they also do just cover all the basics of like wilderness, making contacts, all that type of stuff. And I guess that could be the concept of like, we'd be talking about like region-wide or in Colorado or whatever it is just having like a once a year training for any snow ranger to go to, for them to get up to speed and potentially get certified on snowmobiles and whatever else. Because I know like when there's turnover on Forest Service staff and the trainer moves to a different job, all of a sudden there's not someone that can certify someone on snowmobiles or whatever, or chainsaws or whatever it is. So, you know, potentially there'd be more uniformity across Colorado or farther if we did something like that.
And Brendan, is that just internal? Is that just Forest Service employees, or is that open to partners as well?
So as it's, I believe also they are Forest Service volunteers are available to go to that as well. There is a limit to the number of people that can go, and obviously the Forest Service employees get prioritized just because they're working full time doing that, and we need them to like have all the certifications and stuff. But we have sent volunteers to that in the past. And it's a great way to like collaboratively and just engage with all people across different districts and forests and whatever else as well.
Do you know, is that something that other regions do as well?
I do not know that.
Janelle's shaking her head yes. So, okay.
They do it, Region 2 and Region 3 combined together. most of the time for that Wilderness Ranger Academy. So it would seem like California and Colorado could combine, considering the huge winter programs the two have.
I think probably the biggest thing with that is like who would take the lead on that, you know, facilitating it and everything like that. Our regional office, Ralph Swain, Wilderness Coordinator, takes the lead on organizing that academy. But I'm sure it takes like a lot of effort and coordination. So if we were to do something like that, we'd want to probably have someone that can take the lead that has the time capacity to do something like that. And then I believe they move it around to different locations each year, so you can get a different experience any given year.
Awesome, thank you all. I think we're about to get closed out of this meeting room, but if anybody else has anything to add to the discussion or any more questions, I'll give you the floor.
This is Jed, I'm on the San Juan, just on the other side of the Red Mountain Pass from the Ray Ranger District. And I tried to get a snow ranger program going this side on this side this year. Unfortunately, budgets took an even worse turn than we had expected. And so I would love to be able to talk with you, Ray, more about maybe moving money to them so they could have their rangers come onto the San Juan side.
Yeah, that would be awesome. I think you said to the URA Ranger District. Sorry, Rangers.
URA Ranger District on the Uncopadre National Forest. And that's how I learned about this, was through Julie Jackson, who had started getting me in contact with Julie Mock.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Like I said, I have very little to do with the Snow Rangers, but Julie, I'm sure, would be open to the discussions.
Perfect.
And we're going to be closed out any second now.
Okay. Great. I think we got everybody back. Thanks. Hopefully that worked okay and people figured out how to get into their breakout rooms. If you had any trouble, shoot me a quick chat and I'll try to make sure you get into the next one. I know in our group we had a really good discussion. It was also just nice to see some actual faces today. I feel like I've been talking to a blank screen most of the day. But yeah, I'll just run through kind of what we talked about, and then Emily, if you can give us a little recap from your group, that would be awesome. I think when it came to AVI training in particular, none of our groups necessarily had a hard and fast requirement, but a minimum of AVI 1 was ideal for anyone kind of working in this Snow Ranger program. Maybe with the exception of Kim's group in California, because their role's a little bit different. But being able to provide that in some capacity, and then, you know, if people are returning year after year, giving them a pathway to get through that Rec 2 or into a Pro 1 course on the AVI side was helpful. The Forest folks mentioned having an individual development program for some of their staff. So each year they're working on different professional development opportunities. Finding funding for that can be challenging though. In talking about wilderness medicine, similarly pretty low actual requirement of first aid CPR for the forest. For CMC, we require a minimum of a WUFA, but I think the preferred qualification would be a wilderness first responder, a WUFer, but again, challenges with funding some of those trainings. We did talk about just other kind of ongoing trainings that can happen throughout the season. Obviously, you know, for things like snowmobiles and driver training, those big things. But even for the devices that you're using every day, your spot satellite communication devices, radios, float packs, you know, the beacon stuff, anything you're using day to day is really important to make sure you're kind of staying in tune with that, you know, technology and with your equipment. And then we also had someone bring up beacon parks as a really great resources, both for staff, but then also as a place to send folks, again, if they're newer, learning how to use their beacon, to be able to know where there are beacon parks located in your area, and share that as a resource for people to check out. So I think those were the big things that we talked about. Emily, I'm curious to hear what all you guys covered in your group.
Yeah, I'm kind of, it was quite interesting because when discussing trainings, actually ARI and advanced wilderness first aid kind of trainings fell to the more, if there is enough time and funding, where the main priorities seem to be snowmobile training, having just a base knowledge of first aid, CPR, chainsaw training, and then and this is mostly coming from Brendan Kelly, and so this was more and forest protection officer training, just so their rangers have the ability to write tickets. I think the reason for the ARI training not being as high on the list is because most of their work is at trailheads, so not necessarily in the backcountry all the time. We talked a little bit about I think the other interesting thing that came up was the idea of opportunities for collaborations and joint trainings. Brendan mentioned they do a joint snowmobile trainings with the U.S. Forest Service and the state parks, which gives rangers an opportunity to, you know, chat with those staff or those people from other agencies that are experiencing different issues. And then also the idea came up that the Forest Service does their Wilderness Ranger Academy, and doing something similar to that once a year, where snow rangers could get all their certs all at once. But the issue being who would coordinate, and you'd really need somebody to take the lead on that kind of training. But I thought that was an interesting idea.
Totally. Yeah, and I just got a email about that Wilderness Ranger training, and was thinking about how we could apply that to the Snow Ranger program. And I'm not quite going to volunteer and raise my hand to coordinate it yet, but maybe that's something we can look at doing in the future. I think this is the first step to doing that, right? Is bringing this group together and starting to talk about it and think about it. So hopefully opportunities like that will come out of this meeting. So yeah, anything else that we missed? Anybody want to add anything that we maybe didn't talk about related to best practices for training?
I just wanted to keep on the table, Julie, just the challenges and the concept and the importance of involving the various volunteer, host, ambassador programs in these trainings, so that we begin to have kind of a standardized playbook across the landscape. Because obviously from a visitor standpoint, somebody comes up with, you know, a variety of different patches and shields and says, hey, do you have a wilderness permit? And you don't really know, are they coming from the Forest Service, or are they coming from the local advocacy organization? And just to sort of begin to set out the parameters for these programs, I think would be super helpful for those of us outside the agency.
Totally. That's a great point, David. Thanks. Excellent. Okay. Well, let's move on kind of to our next breakout discussion topic. it, you know, figured the pandemic is on everyone's mind, and it really does impact these programs, I think, not only from just a use perspective, but from a practical, and, you know, can we even run programs like this during a pandemic, and how do we do so safely, make sure we're taking care of our staff, taking care of our volunteers, and interfacing with the public in a responsible way. So just we'll run through these questions. How did your program respond to COVID last spring? What types of protocols or precautions have you put in place for this season? What sort of use changes have you seen in the backcountry? And what has been kind of most helpful in responding to those changes in use that you've seen? Okay, so I'm going to open up our breakout rooms. Again, I've mixed them up a little bit, so you may see hopefully see some new people in your group. And Emily, I didn't mention this before. We did real quick introductions at the beginning of our session. If that's helpful for you to do, go ahead and do that. If not, no worries. So I'm going to open up those rooms. So you should be able to join your room now. So let's just go through and we'll do really quick introductions, who you are, who you're with, and where you're from. Again, I'm Julie Mott, Conservation Director for the Colorado Mountain Club based in Salida, Colorado. And I'll go around my screen. Kim, you're up first.
Okay. Kim Anaclario, Program Director for Mammoth Lakes Recreation in Mammoth Lakes, California.
Thanks. David?
Hey all, yeah, I'm the locally here in Mammoth Lakes. I'm the chair of the Trails Committee, and I'm on the board of Mammoth Lakes Recreation. So I work really directly with Kim in developing these programs here locally. But I'm also, as the advocacy director for Winter Wildlands Alliance, kind of trying to look at this holistically with our agency partners, really all across the West, and with our grassroots groups, and you know, again, just angling toward a common format that we can all understand to fill these niches that we all know exist.
Great, thanks. The next person is just showing up as iPhone in a kind of blue and red.
Yeah, that's me. Sorry about that. My name is Kevin Cool. I'm with the Mount Huff Ranger District here on the Plumas National Forest. I'm a recreation technician in Quincy, California.
Awesome. Thanks for being here. Yeah. Tommy Skaya.
Hey, I'm not sure why my camera is not showing up.
All good.
Can you hear me? Okay, good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm the Recreation Special Uses Permit Administrator on the Salida Ranger District on the San Isabel National Forest. Sorry I missed the first breakout session. I needed a little more time,
It's all good.
but I'm here now.
Awesome, thanks. Uray Snow Rangers.
Hi, I'm Cricket, the Snow Ranger in the Uray District, which is Southwest Colorado.
Brian, I'm a Snow Ranger as well, so I'll be out there in the backcountry.
I'm Caleb.
Thanks. Joe Carlson.
Hey guys, Joe Carlson, Mountain Sports Wilderness Program Manager in the Gunnison Ranger District, Gunnison National Forest. I oversee the wilderness program and the ski permit with Crested Butte Mountain Resort.
Great, thanks. Bryce?
Hey everyone, I'm Bryce Hoffman on the Rio Grande National Forest Divide Ranger District. I'm the Trails and Winter Sports Specialist down here in South Central Colorado.
Great. Jed? Oh, Jed, you're muted.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jed. I'm rec staff on the Columbine Ranger District on the San Juan, the opposite side from the Uray Ranger District.
Great.
So deal with the Purgatory Ski Area permit, and then just everything in between related to wilderness incursions and Red Mountain and Molus and Coalbank passes.
Got it. Perfect. Great. And Chase?
Yeah, I am a tourism resource assistant with the regional office, but thankfully I'm able to get out to the White River National Forest this winter to help with some field monitoring and observations.
Awesome. Great. Cal, good to see you.
Hey, Julie. Yeah, Cal Orlowski, Eagle Holy Cross Ranger District of the White River National Forest. I oversee the permits for Vail and Beaver Creek ski areas and kind of taking on some new responsibilities of managing winter sports and access and all of our wilderness area incursions and all that kind of other stuff that goes along with being snow ranger here. Thanks for having me.
Great, yeah. And Garrett, you look like you're where we all want to be.
Hey everybody, good afternoon. Yeah, you caught me busted. I'm out actually having some ski PE with my son, and I live really close to Heavenly Mountain, so it's like 3 minutes from my house to the Cal base, so I'm sneaking in some few runs. Yeah, I'm Garrett Villanueva. I'm the Regional Trail and Travel Management Program Leader. I also cover shooting sports, backcountry airstrips, and other dispersed recreation activities. And it's great to be on this call. I really appreciate it. And I'm glad to see some other Region 5 or Pacific Southwest region folks on. Gabby, Bryce, formerly of Region 5. And I think I'm missing someone else too. I don't remember right now. But also hello to all my other Forest Service counterparts out there. Cal, I think I applied for the job you have now about a decade ago. But congratulations. That's a cool job.
Great. Thanks for joining us, Garrett. Is that Gabby that's next?
Yeah, that's me. So my name is Gabby Yanez. I am a Special Uses Permit Administrator here on the Lake Tahoe Basin Management Unit, and I currently administer the Homewood Mountain Resort Ski Slope Permit and some winter sports outfitter and guide permits.
Awesome. Thanks for being here. And then I've got one person on the phone, a 719-530 number. If you're able to unmute yourself. Maybe not. Okay, well, thanks. It's just super helpful to see everybody's face and know who you are. So we've got just a couple of minutes to chat about COVID stuff. Let me share these questions out again. Yeah, and feel free to just kind of jump in. I'm really curious to know how people responded to COVID last spring as far as, you know, their snow ranger programs were concerned, if you were able to continue with yours or needed to pause or halt. And then what kind of protocols or precautions are you, changes are you putting in place for this season? Anybody like to kick us off?
So we don't have any snow rangers on the San Juan side, but the seasonal staff workforce, of course, when COVID got started, we were all told you got to go home, stay home. It wasn't until the big crowds of the summer hit that we started heading out. Of course, face coverings, social distancing. The big one was when developed recreation staff were cleaning restrooms along the 550 corridor or other in developed rec sites. People would literally walk up just feet within the 6 foot distance and wait for the bathroom to be cleaned and available for use. So we had to start putting out signs that said, please, stay back, do not come past this sign while cleaning. As the summer rolled on, things got to be a little bit more routine. And as we rolled into the new fiscal year, seasonal employees rolled off the books, but Forest Service employees, permanent employees, are still heading out to do winter patrols now on snowmobiles. And of course, at that time, we have face coverings because as cold as it is, riding a snowmobile or out on skis and skins, touring around for non-motorized areas. And people seem to be very much more respective of it now, like well-conditioned and staying greater than 6 feet away at this point.
Good, that's good. Thanks, Chad.
All right. Some of you were in my group last time, and hi, Shelby. And I see some familiar faces, but for those of you I haven't met yet, my name's Emily. I work for Emily Bresco. I work for the Colorado Mountain Club with Julie. I started out in the conservation side of things, working with the on the stewardship crew, so in the field. Moved over to education, mostly with working on procuring permits for all of CMC's outdoor recreation schools, and then have transitioned back to the conservation realm of things a little bit more, working with Julie on the RIMS program, which she'll talk about in a little bit. Would anybody else like to introduce themselves and maybe speak a little bit to how your practices for COVID and kind of how the response has been this year?
Sure. My name's Brendan Kelly. I'm the rec staff on the Medicine Bow Route National Forest. And just real briefly about ever since COVID started last spring, we went pretty heavily into a lockdown stage where our employees were really not much engaging with people at all. There was a lot of unknowns, and we just didn't feel comfortable with making very many public contacts. We pretty much weren't doing any public contacts at all at that point. As we progressed into the summer, we started to kind of get a better feel for things, and we started following the COVID guidelines as far as 6-foot distancing. We were cleaning our trucks every single day so we weren't transmitting stuff on surfaces between people, and we were trying to focus on pods, so having like our developed direct seasonals as a pod, our trails people as one pod, to try to cut down on the cross contamination between people. And then just other like tactics that that we used is similar to like when you're making contacts in the public and you want to create some distance between people if it's going to be a sketchy contact. With COVID, we want 6-foot distancing, but you can easily do that farther from that distance, and you can always put the truck between you and the other person to ensure that they don't walk straight up to you, or a snowmobile, stuff like that. And then as far as this winter, we are out and making public contacts and writing tickets and stuff like that. But we're just using the same tactics of using CDC guidelines to do that.
I'm curious about the pods, because we discussed something like that with our seasonal summer cruise, and I'm sure the same discussion happened for our rangers as well. But so all those individuals are do they have they have off time, I imagine, and stuff. So does that pose specific challenges with kind of limiting their groups to that pod?
So yeah, we don't control what they do on their personal time. So obviously we want them to be good on their personal time, but we don't have any control over that. But since it is in the pods, maybe a 3-person trail crew or 2 people volunteering at the parking areas or whatever, at least it's cutting way down on the contact tracing, because we've had a few different COVID outbreaks within our district, and each time it happened, because we had all these procedures in place, it was isolated to like a specific pod, and then they had to quarantine for the 10-day period. Rather than it snowballing and like hitting the whole district program, because that person talked to that person who then like interacted with that person. So it was really helpful in that respect, and just cutting down on the overall exposure. But there's some inherent risks, obviously, with we can't control their personal time. So and I guess the other thing too is just having conversations with the people. Are they comfortable with riding in the truck together, and all the procedures and everything like that?
I'd like to speak to, here, I'll show my video. Hi, everyone. So we have a pretty big volunteer-based ambassador program here on the White River National Forest that, they go sit at trailheads where we have wildlife seasonal closures, and they do education on the closures. So we were pretty hesitant about asking volunteers to go out, busy trailheads, and educate the public. So it took us a while to get this program running, but one of the things we did was create a little sign that says, hey, please stay 6 feet away, and we posted it just on like a stick inside of a traffic cone, and we just kind of set that as a barrier, so people still were able to come up, but we had that physical barrier. It was still pretty friendly and small, and And then they, of course, get to make the decision of whether they felt comfortable being there, because some of our trailheads get pretty busy here.
I think that was a good point that I forgot to mention too, is that we try to avoid our high use areas at the peak times, just because it's hard to socially distance.
Awesome. Does anybody else have anything to add as far as other protocols or precautions they've put in place for this season?
Yeah, I'll bring up one other thing. This is Greg from Gunnison. We did buy no coronavirus stickers, and it doesn't show really well on my snowmobile helmet, but they showed up really well on our hard hats this summer on trail crews. And that was really to just keep people reminded, because the focus of some of we Americans is our attention span is pretty short. So having that sticker, no coronavirus, you might think about putting your buff on or whatever before you go to help that person, wrestle a rock or hand them a tool or whatever. So yeah, one of our folks bought a bunch of stickers for the district and passed them out. We also, at the start, we didn't know what to expect. We were traveling in separate vehicles a lot. I know that's not environmentally the good thing to do, but for a while we were doing that. And Forest Service people know we need to put some miles on our vehicles or we lose them. So there was also another motivation to, I guess, split up at times.
I was just going to add about education days. We do quite a few during the summertime, and summer we didn't do any. And this Saturday is going to be the first education day that we're going to host or help with. And it's a difficult thing because a lot of the public is not as aware. We get quite a bit of training on how to stay 6 feet away and how to protect ourselves. But the public seems to forget what's happening, and they're real aggressive at coming up and wanting to talk to you real close. And I've learned just by making public contacts that if I just put up a hand and say, whoa, and just stop, and they're respective of that for the most part. And that's one of my biggest challenges with making public contacts in the backcountry, is just keeping folks to their distance.
So are those education days focused around mainly how to interact with the public? Are they for the public or for staff?
They're actually for the public.
Right. And it's focused on how to like encourage people to maintain that distance, or just general COVID education all around hygiene, social distance, everything?
Actually, our education days are just for the public to learn how to responsibly recreate in the backcountry. And we are adding COVID measures with that. And along with that, we have a lot of posters and handouts that talk about COVID. But for the most part, it's just education days for responsible recreation.
Well, and are those advertised online, or how do we draw people to attend those? Like, have you had issues getting more and more people to seeking out those education days, or are they just you posted at the trailhead at regular times to engage with people?
Yeah, we're actually just hosting them at trailheads or out in the forest where the public is usually, a lot of folks are at, maybe parking areas or mostly trailheads.
They're also advertised ahead of time, sometimes in the local newspapers and on websites like the Crested Butte Avalanche Center's website. They're probably advertising this education day that they're doing with Laura this Saturday.
Awesome. I'm curious what sorts of changes that you guys have seen in the backcountry since the onset of COVID. More use. That's the overarching theme. Are there any other changes that you've noticed as far as, does it affect user conflict at all, or
It's just more concentrated use at our trailheads, and then more new users as well. So people that have never done that before, which has its own issues. And yeah, I mean, just overflowing trailheads, and then that goes on to private property or county roads where there's illegal parking, and there's just more tension in general, I feel like, when you're out in the backcountry or at the trailhead.
One thing I'll bring up, and it's not going to be this way every winter because we're probably going to keep having more and more use, and everybody's talking about it this year, but one thing in our area I've noticed, and it's probably because the shallow snowpack we've got around Crested Butte, it really isn't that good, at least especially for motorized. So even though everybody's talking about a lot of use, I think early this winter it's been toned down a little bit because people go out once and they'll find out, you know, they hit 6 rocks or something like that. So until we get more snowpack, or if we get more snowpack, I think then we're really going to get the use.
What we're seeing, so I live up in Bozeman, Montana, and our snowpack is pretty bad this year for pretty much the entire area, except for there's one zone that has not as good as usual, but better than everywhere else snow. And so there's a lot of people and they're all going to one small area, whereas they'd otherwise be spread out. And we've seen a number of, avalanche incidents and search and rescue happening, and it's all putting pressure on this really small remote place. And so there's a real imbalance there. It's like all that pressure is just getting put in a really small area. So it would maybe be more manageable if there was better snow across the whole district or across the whole forest.
That's interesting that the low snow year is both helping and hurting in some, depending on where you're at, at least with the use, not with the climate. So out of all, as far as COVID goes, what we talked about a few strategies that you've implemented. Which ones have been the most helpful in responding to COVID?
I think one thing for us, the pods really helped us out because originally we were looking at 1 person per truck and really operating really independently, but we didn't have near enough trucks to be able to implement that successfully, especially in the summertime. And then we were also worried about just like if every single person's driving, you're increasing the amount of like hazard from driving. And so I think doing the pod idea, both from like cutting down on the contact potential, as well as just like the safety factor of how many people are driving and stuff like that, and having enough trucks. I think that was definitely a good decision we made as we were progressing into the summer and into the winter.
I'll open the floor to if anybody else wants to jump in.
Can you hear me? Anyone? Can anyone hear me?
Yep.
I think that my district is in an interesting case where we are super strict with COVID. And Emily, you know this because we've never met in person before. So we are still operating like we did when we were in April when this all began. We're not driving in the same vehicles. We're not going into the office. We have to schedule time to go into the office. So if your cubicle is next to someone else, you guys can't go into the office the same day. You have to schedule different days. Or if I were to go, if my permits live in a room where someone else works and they're working that day, I can't also work because I potentially will need to pass them to get my permit. So it's been a really interesting year for me, especially since I'm a new permanent employee. I feel like it's been hard getting trainings. It's been really hard to like do inspections of outfitters because we're just really, really strict where we are. I haven't even been skiing at Loveland and I'm their snow ranger because we're concerned about the level of contact potentially being made or getting stuck in a lift line. And I know other districts are, they still have protocols in place, but allow them to actually go out and mitigate the other risks that come from us not actually being out there. So like as a snow ranger, your job is to go out there and like do your checks and balances for the ski area. And that's an inherent risk that we as employees try to mitigate. Do they have everything that they need to operate safely and effectively? But if we're not out there, even though Loveland Ski Area is great and they've been doing it a long time and I completely trust them, the risk of COVID is more or less outweighing the other risks that we have to mitigate for our jobs. So it's been an interesting year for me. I've been able to complete things like you and I have worked together on the permit, and I've been able to, like in the summertime, if I was doing rec res inspections and I was by myself and I didn't need anyone else, and a lot of our cabin holders aren't there all the time, it was easy for me to get that done. But some of this winter work that requires a little bit more like one-on-one or touching base with people or like working in a ski area, doing our checks, it's been a little difficult. So I like these ideas of pods, and I like hearing what other districts are doing because potentially I could advocate for this at my district so that we can have a little bit more efficiency when it comes to doing our jobs effectively.
Thanks, Shelby. And I think we're going to get closed out in about 42 seconds. But does anybody else have any more comments quickly on communication as far as COVID goes? Because that poses a super big issue, right? When you can't be, if you are still maximum isolation.
I was going to say that was one thing we did was put a lot of signage up at our popular trailheads that said, public, please do 6-foot distancing, no group gathering, that type of stuff. Because that way, even if we're not there, hopefully cut down on some of the issues out there.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everybody. We're going to get closed out and bounce back into the main.
Awesome. I think we're getting just about everybody back. Emily, I'll let you share out first. I apologize. I know you were supposed to be done at 1, so thank you for sticking with us. Hopefully you're not missing another big meeting. But yeah, Emily, if you want to share out what you guys talked about related to COVID, that would be awesome.
Yeah, no problem. I'm not missing a meeting, by the way. I'm just in meetings all day, so this is it was me reserving my lunch break time. So some of the major things that came up, it seemed like a lot of folks, and I think we had the similar thing, went into lockdown initially, separate vehicles, separate everything, and some folks are still in that realm. The CMC, Julie, you'll know better than me as far as the snow rangers. I just know for our summer cruise, we were still kind of maintaining that distance and separate vehicles or no more than 2 people per vehicle. We have kind of a hybrid between isolation and pods idea. So, and then the other side of that was the concept of those pods of smaller groups of people who are working together closely, and though there is like inherent risk in individuals, everybody has the right to their own free time, and everything's inherent risk as far as exposure to the virus. It cuts down on risk of having a major outbreak, right? You can track back the sources back to those smaller groups and those smaller pods, and have a better handle on it, so it's not affecting the entire agency. The other thing we discuss is just the communication aspect with the public. By one of the ideas is having signs and even stickers on the snowmobile helmets that say no COVID, that just bring awareness of the public to have their mask on and to keep that distance, and signs that are placed between those providing information and the public to remind people to keep that 6 foot distance. The other aspect to communication was a great idea, was the education days. So just into the normal education days for the public on how to recreate responsibly on public lands, integrating those COVID measures as part of being a responsible recreator on public lands. And I think, and the other aspect of it was just communication challenges. Some agencies are really still on really strict lockdown, and it definitely affects like how you can communicate with other agency personnel.
Yeah, great. Excellent points. Yeah, and I think, really similarly, our group kind of discussed the progression, right? When COVID first hit, there was this major lockdown, and then we saw this explosion of use in the summer, and a lot of people not really used to social distancing or mask wearing. They mentioned, cleaning their developed rec sites, the bathrooms, people are standing right on top of them waiting to use the bathroom and just not having that familiarity with some of the protocols. But over time, it seems like now that we're moving into the winter season, it's a little easier to wear masks or buffs in the cold weather, and people seem to be just a little bit more, they're used to standing 6 feet away from each other, or sometimes more, and so that just the overall kind of social norms of the COVID protocols is more apparent now than it was maybe 6 months ago. I talked about masks in vehicles and kind of those basic protocols for traveling and communicating and interacting with not only kind of fellow staff, but then with the public as well. And then we did talk about, having really consistent messaging coming from different sources, right? So that the snow rangers are not the COVID police, right? There's signage in the local communities, at trailheads, on brochures in different places. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of that later today, but having that consistent messaging coming from a lot of different sources, so that the snow rangers don't have to be the enforcers of that, and having that messaging be consistent is super helpful. So another thing we mentioned, and we actually caught Garrett from California out skiing currently, so we can all be extra jealous of him right now, but talking about some, having some winter awareness, winter recreation awareness weeks. And we had one in Colorado as well, and just, big social media pushes centered around not only just, avalanche awareness and safety, but also, COVID safety while you're out recreating in the winter. So some opportunities for, again, bigger, either community-wide or statewide outreach initiatives like that can be really effective. I think those were the big things that we hit on. Anybody from my group, did we miss anything, or from either group, did we miss anything in that discussion? Okay. Cool. Well, hearing nothing, I think we'll shift and move to our next topic.
major meeting room.
Awesome. I think we're getting just about everybody back. Emily, I'll let you share out first. I apologize. I know you were supposed to be done at 1, so thank you for sticking with us. Hopefully you're not missing another big meeting. But yeah, Emily, if you want to share out what you guys talked about related to COVID, that would be awesome.
Yeah, no problem. I'm not missing a meeting, by the way. I'm just in meetings all day, so this is my. It was me reserving my lunch break time. Some of the major things that came up, it seemed like a lot of folks, and I think we had the similar thing, went into lockdown initially, separate vehicles, separate everything, and some folks are still in that realm. The CMC, Julie, you'll know better than me as far as the snow rangers. I just know for our summer cruise, we were still kind of maintaining that distance in separate vehicles or no more than 2 people per vehicle. We have kind of a hybrid between isolation and pods idea. And then the other side of that was the concept of those pods of smaller groups of people who are working together closely, and though there is like inherent risk in individuals, you know, everybody has the right to their own free time and everything, there's inherent risk as far as exposure to the virus. It cuts down on risk of having a major outbreak, right? You can track back the sources back to those smaller groups and those smaller pods, and have a better handle on it, so it's not affecting the entire agency. The other thing we discuss is just the communication aspect with the public. One of the ideas is having signs and even stickers on the snowmobile helmets that say no COVID, that just bring awareness of the public to have their mask on and to keep that distance, and signs that are placed between those providing information and the public to remind people to keep that 6-foot distance. The other aspect to communication was a great idea, was the education days. So just into the normal education days for the public on how to recreate responsibly on public lands, integrating those COVID measures as part of being a responsible recreator on public lands. And I think, and the other aspect of it was just communication challenges. Some agencies are really still on really strict lockdown, and it definitely affects like how you can communicate with other agency personnel.
Yeah, great. Excellent points. Yeah, and I think, you know, really similarly, our group kind of discussed the progression, right? When COVID first hit, there was this major lockdown, and then we saw this explosion of use in the summer, and a lot of people not really used to social distancing or mask wearing. They mentioned, you know, while cleaning their developed rec sites, the bathrooms, people are standing right on top of them waiting to use the bathroom and just not having that familiarity with some of the protocols. But over time, it seems like now that we're moving into the winter season, it's a little easier to wear masks or buffs in the cold weather. And people seem to be just a little bit more, you know, they're used to standing 6 feet away from each other or sometimes more. And so that just the overall kind of social norms of the COVID protocols is more apparent now than it was maybe 6 months ago. I talked about masks in vehicles and kind of those basic protocols for traveling and communicating and interacting with not only kind of fellow staff, but then with the public as well. And then we did talk about, you know, having really consistent messaging coming from different sources, right? So that the snow rangers are not the COVID police, right? There's signage in the local communities, at trailheads, you know, on brochures in different places, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of that later today. But having that consistent messaging coming from a lot of different sources, so that the snow rangers don't have to be the enforcers of that, and having that messaging be consistent is super helpful. So another thing we mentioned, and we actually caught Garrett from California out skiing currently, so we can all be extra jealous of him right now, but talking about some, having some winter awareness, winter recreation awareness week. So we had one in Colorado as well, and just big social media pushes centered around not only just avalanche awareness and safety, but also COVID safety while you're out recreating in the winter. So some opportunities for, again, bigger either community-wide or statewide outreach initiatives like that can be really effective. I think those were the big things that we hit on. Anybody from my group, did we miss anything, or from either group, did we miss anything in that discussion? Okay. Cool. Well, hearing nothing, I think we'll shift and move to our next topic. And this actually it's come up throughout kind of the discussion here a bit today, but I'm going to talk a little bit more about monitoring and our recreation impact monitoring system, our RIMS mobile app, for folks that are interested in that. And so let me share my share my screen here. And as we're talking, feel free to put questions into the chat box. I will do my best to monitor that while I am presenting. And then if not, we'll have some time kind of at the end before we take our last break to talk about this in more detail. So hopefully y'all can see my screen. Again, this has come up multiple times today as this importance and really opportunity when we have snow rangers, whether they're staff or volunteers out on the ground, to collect data while they're out there. The Outdoor Industry Association was estimating that 20% increase, this is based on gear sales and things in backcountry winter use. We heard Ari mention a 25% increase in people taking avalanche courses, the majority of those being Rec 1 and kind of folks that are probably new to the backcountry. And I think, over time, we've just had anecdotal reports on user numbers, at least in most of the places that I've been, associated with or familiar with in Colorado. And I think part of that is just traditional monitoring methods maybe don't work in the winter. And so I think, thinking about that carefully and trying to figure out how we can do a better job of monitoring, knowing that, trail counters probably aren't going to work quite the same way as they do in the summer, right? You've got issues with where you place them in order to capture people that are potentially accessing, kind of from a more dispersed area, snow conditions, right, getting buried in snow or getting covered in by the plows and things like that. So, placement of those automated monitoring devices is just a lot harder. I do know of some programs, particularly over in the Crested Butte area, where they're using cameras, kind of like game cameras, to capture visitor use. But a lot of that has to happen on their winter roads, right? The roads that are kind of plowed and open enough that they can place a camera and it can be maintained through the winter. And I think we talked about this a little bit. It'll be really interesting, I think, at the end of this year to look at the correlation in use numbers and avalanche incidents. And, it's not necessarily causal, but I would be real interested to learn more about that relationship. So hopefully Ari and other folks that are doing that kind of research can share with us what they find. So, with all these kind of challenges and constraints around how we maybe would do automated visitor use monitoring, CMC has been working on a bigger program to address this and other just data collection issues in the field. We know with limited staff and limited resources, the agency is just, it's hard to have people out on the ground, right? And So what we ended up creating was a mobile app. We call it CMC RIMS. It stands for Recreation Impact Monitoring System. And it's really meant to help kind of crowdsource some of this information to use for land management planning. So it is oriented towards land managers. It's not a recreation app. I'm not going to open it to go look and figure out where to go skiing or hiking or mountain biking for the day. The data is kind of curated for management uses. And essentially the way it works is a user logs in. We actually have a training that they can go through to get full access to the app, but they can create an assessment, and each one of those assessments is geolocated. So they drop a pin and then can answer a series of surveys and questions and drop downs. They can add notes and photos about the different issues that they're seeing out in the field, and makes it really, we want to really capture a complete picture of what is going on, knowing that, as a land manager, having, pictures and kind of objective data is going to be really helpful in your management decisions or stewardship plans, that sort of thing down the road. I'm going to focus on the visitor use assessment because I think, for winter use, that's kind of the most applicable. But we do have a signs and facilities assessment, a trail assessment, a dispersed camping assessment, and other types of data in the app. So feel free to check it out and look at it a bit more. But specifically to the visitor use assessment, we have basically people encounters and vehicle encounters. So we break people encounters down by user types. You can also add information about dogs, whether they're on or off leash, different types of technology, if you're seeing drones or e-bikes, that sort of thing out in the field. And then that parking assessment too, which again, for a lot of these winter recreation areas is really key in understanding not only, how full the lots are and where people are parking within the lot itself, but then actually where people are parking illegally or where they shouldn't be parking. And I think, for plowing implications and all those sorts of things, it's really helpful to have those photos and pictures and understanding where that overflow is happening from a parking perspective. Just a couple of screenshots from the app. So the first one, you can see the different types of assessments that you can do. So as soon as you hit that plus button, you get this list and you can decide if you want to do that visitor use assessment, then you would see the next screen. The app automatically pulls your GPS points, your GPS location, and it'll work offline. So obviously if you're in the backcountry and you're in a place without cell service, the app will still grab your location, save all of the information remotely, and then you can sync it up when you get back into cell service. So again, questions on people, dogs, stock, technology, vehicles. We do have a specific winter activities section for people, so we can get pretty granular in the type of backcountry use that we're seeing out in the field. And then of course the parking, we also distinguish between vehicles with trailers, without trailers, empty parking spaces. We even have drop downs for different states. So if you want to do an analysis of, in Colorado, it's how many Colorado plates and how many Texas plates are we seeing in each parking lot, right? But getting a sense for whether you've got, mainly in-state folks or mainly out-of-state folks using different recreation areas, and you may see different trends in different places. On the back end of the app, we have dashboards that we are working with different land managers to set up. We're just getting our Year-A dashboard set up for our snow rangers, but also for the summer kind of recreation trail stuff down there. I'll show you just a couple screenshots. These are big picture things, and these are all of our RIMS assessment in the whole program. So we've got over 400 or 4,000 data points just over in the last less than 18 months since we launched the app. And you can see those broken out by different types, and within the dashboards themselves, you can actually click on any one of these numbers and drill into that data, put it on a map, export it, move it into ArcGIS, do whatever you might need to do with the actual data. For visitor use in particular, we're actually kind of just building our data set associated with visitor use. And this is just a snapshot of some data. We had an individual in Leadville collecting info every time he went out, you know, cross-country skiing or fat biking. He would do a count of the number of people he saw, and you can start to see, you know, we can build out these trends week by week or month by month, and even, you know, again, within a certain day, look at temporal trends, right? We're going to see our peak of backcountry skiers most likely in the morning when the snow is fresh, and then it tapers off in the afternoon, or maybe not, depending on the location and accessibility and things. So we've just a lot of opportunities in these dashboards to then kind of crunch the numbers in different ways. This is the short link to our website with more information about the app itself. If you do, you can download it. It's free and available to the general public. You can just search CMC Rims either in the Google Play or the App Store and download it for free. That's, you know, our biggest thing is we want to make sure that volunteers are able to use this quickly and easily. It's super user friendly and not overly complicated from a volunteer perspective. I think, you know, the Esri products, Survey 123 and Art Collector are pretty common in the agencies, and I think they're getting better, but, you know, our experience was that it was challenging to get volunteers using those programs. They weren't always accessible given kind of the agency restrictions on data access, and yeah, so we wanted to create something that was a little bit more accessible and available for folks to use. So please do check out the app. I'm happy to answer more questions about it if folks have specific questions. And then I also wanted to just kind of, again, open up this discussion for the next 10 to 15 minutes about monitoring in general and how folks are doing that in different places. How much does it cost? How much are you spending on monitoring each season? And what is the biggest cost? Is the biggest cost just, you know, staff time to be out there? Or are there other programs or equipment that you're using for this monitoring? And what else are we missing? You know, visitor use, I think for me at least, in the winter is the biggest thing that comes to mind. But obviously, you know, there's other trail issues. You know, we saw a downed tree in a photo earlier, signage issues, things like that we could be reporting on. I know Winter Wildlands has done work on snowpack and snow depth analysis and engaging volunteers and citizen scientists in that data collection. Wildlife encounters is another one that has come up recently, and Colorado Parks and Wildlife wanting to know if our snow rangers are seeing moose or seeing lynx and where they're seeing them, that sort of thing. So yeah, I'm going to just open up this discussion. And I think we've been doing a pretty good job of not talking over one another. So if people have questions, we can kind of just jump in. But I've got one from Jed in the chat here, and he is asking me to expand on how Forest Service employees can view the data. I'm assuming that's out of the RIMS app. And yeah, Jed, so what we're working on is one, first of all, you can view all of the data in the app itself. So you can see assessments that other people complete within the app. So really at any time with a free account, you can go in and look at the data. And then we're working on setting up these custom dashboards, and that's what we're doing with the URA Ranger District, where they would actually have an individual login to one of these dashboards. The data is clipped down to just show their Ranger District, right? They don't want to look at all of Colorado data. They just want, their local information. And then we can set up those custom dashboards to show the information that's really important and relevant. So I'd be happy to talk to folks individually on how we go about kind of setting up those dashboards as well. And then I think I saw a raised hand from Garrett. If you want to unmute yourself, yeah, go ahead.
Thanks. This is, I'm super excited about this app, but I am in California. And it looks like, I did just download the app just now. It works great. And I was curious, part of the success of the app is going to be how well people participate in using it, of course. And I don't know how the Colorado Mountain Club feels about, what are your goals with this? Is it really to be kind of a, West Coast or nationwide type of resource, or, and if not, are there opportunities for collaboration with, some of the groups in the Sierra Nevadas, and what might that look like in order to make this successful? And yeah, my question was the same as I think Julie's is, which you answered to, is, how do we get the data? So it's nice that it's so transparent. It's really an awesome tool that you built. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Yeah, totally. Thanks, Garrett. Yeah, and to that point, so one, there's no geographic boundaries as far as using the app. Because CMC is based in Colorado and that's where most of our partners are, that's where we've focused our kind of outreach and connections. Like I said, we only launched the app about 1.5 years ago, so most of our data is here. We are absolutely not opposed to using it in other places and working with forests and managers across the country. Right now we're actually talking with groups both in Oregon and in Alaska about the app, in one, just using the app kind of as it stands, but also in Alaska looking at essentially recasting it, and they work with Native communities and want to really have a little bit of a different look and a different focus, but essentially use the same platform. So we're open to tons of opportunities to grow the program. And help connect local volunteers and have them collect the data the land managers actually want. I think that's something that we've seen too, as far as the volunteer engagement, is it actually helps to have really specific areas where we can send people to go and collect data. If we just say, here's the app, use it whenever you're out, we get some folks that'll use it every single time they come across a downed tree or come, every time they pull up to a parking lot. But for a lot of folks, it actually helps to assign them with a data collection plan, right? So you signed up for Saturday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. and you're gonna sit at this trailhead and count every single, car and skier and snowmobiler that comes in, right? And having those more structured data collection opportunities for folks has helped a bit with the engagement. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question. Other folks with questions or just thoughts on these monitoring questions that I've got up here on the screen. How else are folks doing monitoring currently?
Oh, this is Brendan. I was going to say we kind of have a variety of ways we've done it. Historically, it's always been paper monitoring with our partners and volunteers and star rangers. We have a one-page document that's just you do your daily logs of how many people you saw and all this type of data. We've been playing around with the collector and Survey 123 just because they're free to us. That's definitely our biggest limiting factor, is just like very limited resources. This RIMS app definitely seems really cool and probably more user-friendly for our external partners and stuff like that. So I can't remember, what's the cost for the dashboard for like a year? Or...
Yeah, it depends on the number of users and kind of level of customization. It really, for a ranger district, it can be anywhere from about $1,500 to $5,000, depending on what the needs are. But we are working on some other ways to provide that data to land managers by doing just a data service that routes the information right into an ArcGIS Online account. So that's something that we're just rolling out in the next month or two here, and happy to explore those different options for accessing the data that's coming in through RIMS.
Yeah, I think that's definitely would be helpful to be able to access the data, because if we're producing our own maps and stuff like that, to be able to show trends and everything else like that, I think it'd be helpful to be able to get the data.
Yep.
And then are you able to filter the data, say like, oh, I know my snow rangers, these people's names are doing like really good surveys versus just the general public?
Yeah, totally.
Stuff?
Yeah, within the dashboards, you can essentially filter on any metric within the app, right? So you can you can do a geographic filter, you could do a user filter and just say, yep, I only want to see data from these 5 people because that's you know, we know it's good data. So yeah, great question. I hear Kelly's brand new baby in the background.
Oh, sorry, I thought I was on mute.
No, you're good. Any other questions or thoughts on monitoring?
Not really a question, and not necessarily about monitoring, but maybe just because you've been the one to convene this, you guys could kind of be the clearinghouse looking forward, kind of in just to add to Garrett's question, you know, how do we take all this data, move it out of the app, synthesize it in a way that we can use more broadly? And I'd certainly like to volunteer Winter Wildlands Alliance to participate in that. Doing some high-level studies once we've collected a bunch of data, I think will be super useful.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the coolest things that, you know, we've seen with, say, the trails data or the campsite data is you can roll it up at multiple different levels, right? And I think that's been the challenge with like forest visitor use monitoring that happens every 5 years, and you get a stat for the forest on the overall kind of, you know, guesstimate of users. However, it's really hard to get that local granular trailhead data, right? And so we're hoping with RIMS to be able to do a bit of both, right? To have that really more focused site-specific information, but then also roll it up at a district level, a forest level, a region level, or even a national level to look more broadly. So yeah, posted on that.
Julie, I have a different question, if I may. Is there a summer kind of version of this as well that CMC is working with?
Yeah, so in the RIMS app itself, it includes both summer and winter. And if you just downloaded the app, you won't see the trails assessments until you go through the training, which there's links on the website for that. It's like a 20-minute video. But yeah, we have the trail assessment, the campsite assessment, the signs and facilities assessment that are kind of oriented more towards summer uses.
Okay, yeah, I mean, this is an amazing tool, and I think the opportunity for us to share it out amongst multiple partner groups is enormous. But does that like freak you out or anything? Like if we start having widespread participation, are we gonna break it?
Yeah, no, not at all. I'd love to talk offline with you about how we can coordinate it, and just make sure we're doing it in a way that meets your guys' needs, and we've got the capacity to support it. So
okay, great. We'll follow up.
Awesome.
Yeah, Julie, I was just gonna give a plug for our district and how it's been used in both winter and summer. We have several nonprofits, the Great Old Broads, Uray Trail Group, in the summertime utilizing it. And so Julie's helped put on those courses to teach people how to use it. And so it's broken out for agency folks and for other groups to enter that information. I see it as valuable for one, I don't know if you've mentioned this, Julie, but you just also talk to our local state grants and programs as far as for summer and winter. So being able to actually have numbers show that, have pictures, it's just very easy for us to access. So I find it super helpful so far in our district, and it's in the early stages. Cricket was just telling me last winter there's some glitches, but it's continuing to grow. And as a survey 1, 2, 3, like I've tried to work with our folks here, and that just is a huge process of like what questions we can even ask visitors. So yeah, it's been super beneficial for both summer and winter on our district so far.
Thanks, Caleb. Awesome. Great. Well, if there aren't any other questions at this point on, or our thoughts on monitoring, maybe what we'll do is we'll close this session a little bit early. I know we are waiting on a couple of presenters who are going to be joining us at 2. So we'll get a little bit of a longer ski break this afternoon. Yeah, we'll meet back here at 2 o'clock and we will kind of do our final discussion, which is all about partnerships and communicating with the public. So yeah, thanks everybody, and thanks so much for hanging on with us today. I know this has been a marathon Zoom session, but I've been blown away by the conversations and discussions, and I've learned a ton already. So yeah, thanks, and we'll see you guys back here at 2.